Wade's hand shot forward, aiming for Derek's collar, but in a single fluid motion, Derek twisted his arm behind his back, slamming him face first into the table. The entire bar froze. Chairs scraped. Glasses stopped midair. No one expected the quiet man in sneakers to move like a soldier. Hi, everyone. Today we're diving into a story that feels all too real for too many people. Imagine serving your country, wearing the uniform, and coming home expecting peace only to face doubt, suspicion, and outright hostility in your own neighborhood. Now picture this: a quiet bar, a few empty stools, the low hum of a jukebox, and a stare from across the room that says you don't belong here. This could happen to anyone, even you. So before we dive into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Derek Lawson pulled his dusty Ford Ranger into the gravel lot beside Pine Hollow Tavern. The sun had dipped behind the tall pine trees, leaving streaks of gold across the cracked windshield. He killed the engine, sat for a moment, and exhaled slowly. The kind of breath you take when you're about to let go of something heavy. His fingers, calloused from years of combat gear and desert heat, rested on the steering wheel for just a beat longer than necessary. Inside the bar was dim and familiar, a wood-paneled haven with creaky floorboards, taxidermy on the walls, and a jukebox that hadn't had a new song added since the early 90s. Johnny Cash murmured in the background, Sunday morning coming down, like the song itself was tired. Derek stepped inside the door, creaking behind him as heads turned, glanced, then looked away. He wasn't dressed flashy: camo jacket, scuffed sneakers, a plain ball cap. No medals, no boots, just comfort. That was the point. He slid into a corner booth, one that gave him full view of the room, old habit, and ordered a glass of water. No beer, no whiskey. He just wanted to breathe. The sounds of laughter, clinking glasses, and muted conversation surrounded him like a warm, distant tide. This was supposed to be a quiet night. Nothing more. But things never stay quiet long when pride walks in, looking for a target. The door slammed open not long after, and the mood shifted like a temperature drop before a storm. 6 men walked in leather jackets, heavy boots, confident swagger. The kind of entrance that was loud even when it wasn't. At their center was a man who moved like he owned the ground he walked on. Wade McKinney. Broad shoulders, thick beard streaked with gray, and a pair of eyes that didn't blink often. They took over the bar like they always did, claimed a section, laughed louder than they needed to. Derek didn't react. He didn't flinch. He sipped his water until he felt it, that stare. Heavy, unrelenting, from across the room. Wade had spotted him. At first it was just a glance, then a double take, then a nudge to the man beside him. Wade's eyes narrowed like he'd seen something he didn't like but couldn't yet explain. The sneakers, maybe. The way Derek wore the jacket. The way he didn't lower his head. Something about Derek Lawson had lit a fuse Wade couldn't ignore. He stood slowly, still grinning, but there was something behind it now. He said something low to his group, and a few of them laughed, eyes flicking toward Derek. Wade started walking, his boots dragging along the floor like a warning bell. Derek looked up, once met his eyes, then turned back to his drink. Calm, collected, waiting. Wade stopped a few feet from the booth, folded his arms, and tilted his head. "Well, look what we got here," he said, voice raised just enough to draw attention. Halloween came early. A few of his buddies chuckled. The bar didn't laugh. It listened. Derek didn't move. "Just having a drink," he said evenly. Wade squinted. "You wear that jacket like you earned it, but something tells me you didn't." Derek looked up. Not angry, just tired. "And what tells you that the shoes, for starters?" Wade said, motioning to the sneakers. "Real soldiers wear boots." "I wore plenty of boots," Derek said quietly. "These just feel better now." Wade's smile tightened. "So you're saying you served? I'm saying I don't owe you an explanation." That stung more than any insult. Wade shifted his weight like a boxer in the ring. The air in the bar grew heavy. One of Wade's guys started recording with his phone. Another leaned against the bar, whispering to a patron. Derek could feel it. The room wasn't with him, not yet. "I've seen real soldiers," Wade said, taking a half step closer. "And they don't hide in corners. They stand tall, proud, not like some poser looking for free drinks." Derek stood slowly, not threatening. Just rising, his full height now visible. Calm, steady, solid as the foundation under his boots, no sneakers. "I'm not hiding," he said. "I'm resting." Wade's laugh had no humor. "Sure you are." The moment hung there sharp as glass. And then Wade leaned in, just a little too close. "You're a disgrace to that jacket," he said. "And if you're not going to take it off, someone ought to do it for you." Derek's hands didn't twitch. His face didn't move. But something behind his eyes shifted. He looked beyond Wade toward the bartender, toward the door, toward the 6 men sitting at the bar who were now pretending not to watch. And then he sat back down. "You don't want to do this," he said quietly. Wade's eyes flashed. Or what, the jukebox clicked. The song ended. Silence followed. No one moved. No one breathed. Just 2 men, a soldier and a stranger with something to prove. Wade didn't blink. The silence in the room only made him bolder. He leaned in closer, his knuckles brushing the edge of Derek's table as if daring him to flinch. But Derek didn't flinch. His posture remained relaxed, shoulders, loose hands flat on the table. Still his eyes were locked on Wade's, unwavering quiet, but not passive. "You talk like you've seen things," Wade said with a sneer. "But you don't look like no soldier I've ever known. You look like a kid trying to wear his daddy's uniform." Derek gave no response. Not because he didn't have one, but because he'd learned sometimes silence says more than words ever could. But silence can also be gasoline to a man like Wade. It made him feel dismissed, small, and the only way he knew to fight that feeling was to double down on his noise. "What's the matter? Nothing to say now," Wade goaded. "Thought all you guys were supposed to be heroes. Maybe you're just another coward in camo." "Huh," Derek exhaled slow and steady, then lifted his glass and took a long sip of water. The gesture was calm but deliberate, each second stretched out like a warning. The glass hit the table with a soft thud. "I've said what I needed to say," Derek replied. "Now you should walk away." But Wade didn't walk away. He scoffed, straightened up, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I think you're a fraud. Bet you don't even know what MRE stands for. Probably can't name your unit, much less your commanding officer. Ain't no way you served. You're just another stolen valor punk." A couple of bar patrons shifted uncomfortably in their stools. The bartender, a wiry man in his 50s named Cal, froze mid-wipe with a towel still in his hand. The tension was a living thing now coiled, buzzing in the air like a rattlesnake under a porch step. Wade's boys behind him started smirking again. One of them, a lanky man with a cigarette tucked behind his ear, leaned in and whispered to another, "Bet he'll crack. Just give Wade a minute." But it wasn't Wade who made the next move. It was Derek, not aggressive, not fast. He stood again slower this time, stepping just far enough from the table to remove any doubt about whether he was retreating. He wasn't. "I don't have to prove anything to you," Derek said calmly. "Not here. Not anywhere." Wade's face darkened. "You think you're better than me?" "No," Derek replied. "I think I've seen more than you. And I know how this ends if you keep pushing." Wade clenched his jaw. "Oh, yeah. How's it end?" Derek's eyes narrowed. "With you on the floor and me wishing I hadn't had to put you there. That did it." With a bark of rage, Wade lunged forward and grabbed at Derek's collar. It wasn't clean. It wasn't precise. But it was fast and sloppy. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Derek moved instinctively. One hand came up to deflect the grab, the other caught Wade's wrist midair. He twisted with practiced precision, stepping into Wade's momentum and flipping him forward, guiding his mass like water around a stone. Wade hit the edge of the table with a hollow thud. Face first, his arm locked painfully behind him. A shocked gasp rippled through the bar. Glasses clinked, a chair scraped. Someone cursed under their breath. Wade groaned, trying to buck up, but Derek applied just enough pressure to remind him he wasn't going anywhere. "I told you," Derek said softly, his voice low and unshaken. "You didn't want this." He wasn't showboating. He wasn't grandstanding. He was just tired of pretending. Men like Wade weren't dangerous when allowed to grow bold unchecked. One of the other bikers, Ronnie, a wiry man with a twitchy leg, took a cautious step forward. "Hey, man," he said, voice cracking slightly. "Just let him go, all right? No one wants trouble here." Derek looked up. His grip on Wade didn't falter. "He came at me," Derek said, clear and measured. You all saw it. Ronnie nodded quickly, holding up his hands. Yeah, we saw. We just, let's not make this worse. The bartender, Cal, finally set down the towel and reached under the bar. His hand hovered near the phone. Son, he said carefully, you want me to call someone? Before Derek could answer, Wade spat out. Yeah, call him. Get the cops. This man assaulted me. He ain't no soldier. He's a fake. Derek slowly released his grip and stepped back. Wade stumbled to his feet, rubbing his arm face red from humiliation and pressure. He turned to his crew, his voice trembling with fury. Get your phone out. Call 911. I want him arrested. He put hands on me. He's wearing a fake uniform. The guy with the cigarette fumbled with his phone, tapping the screen with jittery fingers. Yeah, we're at Pine Hollow Tavern, he said when the dispatcher picked up. There's this guy here. He attacked my friend. Said he's military, but he's got no boots, no tags. Yeah, we need someone out here. Derek said nothing. He just stood there breathing through his nose, the adrenaline already beginning to fade into that familiar post-conflict stillness. Cal looked at him, then at the group. His eyes held something close to understanding. But he didn't speak. No one did. And then in the distance, the unmistakable sound of sirens growing louder. Red and blue lights soon danced across the walls, blending with the flicker from the jukebox. A patrol car pulled up out front, followed by another. Two officers stepped inside. The first was a tall man with a square jaw and mirrored sunglasses. The second was a woman with keen eyes and a badge that caught the light when she moved. The energy in the room shifted again. All noise stopped. Only breathing remained. We got a call about an assault and a possible impersonation of military personnel, the male officer said. Who's involved? Wade, still flushed and panting, pointed directly at Derek. That's him. He jumped me. Said he was a soldier, but he's got no proof. No boots, no tags. He's a fraud. The officer turned to Derek. Sir Derek raised his chin. He confronted me, grabbed me. I defended myself. I have my military ID and documents in that bag. He gestured calmly to the duffel under the table. The female officer's eyes scanned the bar. Did anyone witness what happened? Silence? Then Cal cleared his throat. I saw it. Wade here made the first move. The other man just reacted. No excessive force. Just controlled. One of the patrons at the bar nodded. Yeah. Wasn't looking for a fight. That biker started it. Ronnie looked at the ground, didn't speak, but didn't object either. The male officer stepped forward, retrieved Derek's bag, and unzipped it carefully. Inside a neatly folded uniform, full of patches, ribbons, rank evidence of service no one could fake. He pulled out the ID card and inspected it. After a pause, the officer nodded. It's valid. Name, rank, unit. All checks out. He turned to Wade. You sure you want to pursue this? False claims can be serious. Wade's jaw twitched. He laid hands on me. You laid hands on him first, the female officer snapped. Don't test your luck. The bikers looked less bold now. Ronnie slowly stepped behind Wade as if trying to disappear into the floor. The officers exchanged a glance. We'll file a report, the man said. But as of now, no charges. Everyone walk away. Wade glared at Derek. This ain't over. Derek didn't answer, because for him it already was. The flashing lights faded into the night as the patrol cars pulled away from Pine Hollow Tavern, leaving a strange stillness in their wake. Derek remained standing near the table, his hands loosely at his sides, his expression unreadable. Around him, the regulars returned slowly to their drinks, casting the occasional glance his way, not with suspicion anymore, but with something like quiet respect, the kind that comes not from cheers or applause, but from the absence of judgment when the smoke clears. Wade was the last of his crew to shuffle out the door, his gait stiff with humiliation. He didn't say another word. No parting threat, no shouted insult, just the bitter taste of defeat swallowed in silence. Inside, Derek finally sat back down. The bartender, Cal, poured a fresh glass of water and set it gently on the table. No charge, no small talk, just a nod. Appreciate you keeping it together, Cal murmured before walking away. Derek gave a slight nod in return but didn't respond. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel proud. He felt tired in the way only a man who's walked through 2 wars and come home to suspicion can understand. He sipped the water, let it cool the edge off his thoughts. Then he stood, lifted his duffel onto his shoulder, and walked out the door. The parking lot was quiet. His Ford Ranger sat beneath a lamppost, dust sparkling faintly on the windshield. He climbed in, started the engine, and drove home, his headlights cutting a path through the dark North Carolina countryside, the night pressing in around him. The next few days passed without fanfare. No one called. No one knocked. Derek kept to his routines: early runs through the woods, grocery trips to the small market off Cedar Ridge, and long afternoons fixing up his old truck, replacing the starter, sanding down the rust along the rear fender. It was the kind of solitude he had learned to appreciate, a quiet kind, a useful kind. But the events at the bar lingered, not as a wound but as a reminder that even in peace some people are still fighting ghosts of their own pride. Some people look at a black man in uniform and see only the questions they've never had to answer themselves. That kind of ignorance doesn't always shout. Sometimes it stares. Sometimes it whispers in a room full of people too afraid to speak up. And sometimes it lunges. Derek had learned not to carry that weight alone. He'd let it settle, let it breathe, but he didn't invite it to stay. On the third day, just after 4 p.m., the sound of tires crunching over gravel reached his ears as he knelt beside the truck, tightening a bolt. He straightened slowly, wiping his hands on a faded towel, and turned toward the sound. A motorcycle rolled into the driveway, its engine purring low. The rider cut the ignition and stepped off, removing his helmet. It was Ronnie, the nervous one from the bar, the one who hadn't spoken much, but hadn't laughed either. He approached with caution, his hands tucked deep in the pockets of his oversized jacket. He looked around like he wasn't sure this was a good idea, and like he knew it probably wasn't. "Derek Wright," he said, voice quiet. Derek nodded once. "That's me." Ronnie took another step, stopped about 10 feet away. I wanted to say something." Derek didn't speak. He just waited. Ronnie swallowed. "I didn't like what happened the other night, at the bar. I didn't start it, but I didn't stop it either. I should have." Still, Derek said nothing. "I guess. I just came to say I'm sorry." Ronnie continued, glancing at the ground. "Wait, he's got this way of pulling people in, making it sound like he's defending something real. But really, he's just angry about everything. We follow his lead because it's easier than challenging him. But that night, watching how you handled it, I saw what real strength looks like. You didn't yell. You didn't swing. You just stood your ground. And it made me feel small." Derek's voice, when it finally came, was quiet. "It's not about making anyone feel small." "I know," Ronnie said quickly. "That's what makes it worse. You didn't even want that moment. You were just trying to have your drink." He hesitated. "I haven't stopped thinking about it," he said, "about how we looked, how we sounded, and I kept wondering what it must be like for you. Coming back from deployment and still having to prove yourself to guys like us. It ain't right." Derek crossed his arms, his expression softening only slightly. "So what do you want from me, Ronnie?" The man shifted awkwardly. "I guess, I don't know. Forgiveness, understanding, maybe just a chance to do better." The wind stirred through the trees overhead. The cicadas buzzed. The quiet between them stretched long but not tense. "You showing up here," Derek finally said, "that's something. Doesn't fix it, but it's a start." Ronnie looked relieved. "Thank you. I mean it." He turned, straddled the bike, and paused before putting the helmet on. "Wade won't apologize," he said over his shoulder. "But not all of us feel the same way. Some of us saw the truth. And we're trying to be better." Derek gave a slow nod. "Then do better." Ronnie started the engine, gave a half salute, and pulled out onto the road. As the dust settled in his wake, Derek stood still for a long time. Not because he was angry, not because he was afraid, but because for the first time in a long time someone had tried to meet him halfway. And that meant something. He turned back to the truck, picked up his wrench, and got back to work. But his mind wasn't on the engine anymore. It was on a different kind of repair. The kind that starts not under a hood, but in the hearts of men who finally decide to face the truth. That night, the world outside Derek's small house was still. The stars stretched wide and clean across the sky, unmarred by city haze. Crickets sang in rhythmic waves from the tall grass bordering the gravel driveway, and the scent of warm pine hung in the air like a soft memory. Derek stood on his porch arms, folded the wood beneath his boots, groaning with the weight of a long week. He hadn't planned on replaying the scene from Pine Hollow again, but memory's a stubborn thing. It loops without asking, showing you what you wish you'd done, even if you did everything right. The weight of the standoff at the bar wasn't in the force he'd used or the words he'd chosen, it was in how quickly people like Wade felt justified in trying to tear someone down, and how slowly, painfully slowly, others took to stepping up and saying enough. Ronnie's apology helped, yes. It was a glimmer, a human thing. But it wasn't a cure. It didn't erase the stares, the laughter, or the baseless accusation that had led to flashing lights and stiff-lipped police. There were no parades for restraint, no medals for calm. No one sent thank you cards for not throwing the first punch. Just silence and the work of moving forward. The next day, Derek went into town to grab parts for the truck. At the counter of Pete's Auto Supply, the old man behind the register, Pete himself looked up with a slight grunt. "Hey, heard about what happened the other night," he said without ceremony. "You all right?" Derek gave a short nod. "Fine." Pete scratched at his jaw. "Cal from Pine Hollow came by. Said you kept your head. Most wouldn't have." "Did what I had to do," Derek said. Pete rang up the carburetor rebuild kit and slid it across the counter. "World needs more folks who can do what they have to do without burning the place down." It was the closest thing to praise Derek expected, and honestly it was enough. But not everyone who crossed his path that week came with a steady tone. 2 days later, he stepped into a diner on the edge of town. Just coffee, he thought. No drama, no noise. But the waitress behind the counter barely looked at him, took his order without a smile, served him in silence. And at a nearby booth, 2 older men in button shirts exchanged a look he knew too well. One leaned in and whispered something. The other shook his head. He wasn't a stranger to it. Even out of uniform, Derek had learned long ago how to read a room, and the room didn't always have to shout to say, "You don't belong here." He finished his coffee, left a tip anyway, and walked out without a word. It wasn't about weakness. It was about knowing which fights deserve fire and which deserved your back. Later that afternoon, while replacing a headlamp in the driveway, a rusted red truck slowed near the end of the road, then stopped. Derek glanced up. The window rolled down, revealing one of the bar patrons, an older man with thinning hair glasses and a weather-beaten face. He looked familiar, but hadn't spoken during the night of the confrontation. The man didn't get out, just leaned toward the open window. "Didn't say nothing that night," he called out. "But I saw how you handled yourself. Thought you should know some of us did." Derek gave a small nod. "Don't need applause," he replied. "Just honesty." The man tapped the side of the truck, gave a half wave, and drove on. It wasn't much, but it meant something. That night, Derek sat in his kitchen, fingers wrapped around a steaming mug of black tea. The radio played something low and mournful country blues, with steel guitar bleeding into the air. He looked at the folded uniform on the chair by the door. Clean, crisp, badges intact. It had been with him across 3 countries and countless miles. It had soaked up sweat and blood and desert sun. It had earned its place on his shoulders. And yet one man's insult, a shout in a bar, had nearly stripped it of all meaning in the eyes of strangers. That was the real battle. Not the skirmish, not the arm twist, but the quiet, constant fight to be seen as whole. Respect, Derek had learned, wasn't always given. It was taken, demanded, earned, and then tested, again and again. But the test wasn't always public. It wasn't always loud. Sometimes it came in the form of a sideways glance, a muttered word, a question masked as a joke. And sometimes it came walking up your driveway with a helmet in hand. By the end of that week, Derek had heard from no one else in Wade's crew. No phone call, no letter, and that was fine. He wasn't looking for validation from the whole pack. One person seeing the truth was enough to keep the fire lit. One Ronnie was enough. But still, when he passed the mirror that evening and saw his own reflection, calm eyes, firm jaw, steady shoulders, he nodded just slightly. Because he knew the truth. He wasn't just defending himself in that bar. He was defending the weight of the oath he'd sworn, the friends he'd buried, the uniform they'd all worn. He was defending the right to wear it in comfort shoes or not, and that was a battle worth showing up for. Saturday brought with it the kind of stillness that made sound travel farther. Birds chirped more crisply, the breeze carried further, and every turn of a wrench echoed with clarity in Derek's driveway. He was under the truck again, sleeves rolled up, forearms streaked with grease and sunlight. The engine was coming along one bolt, one gasket at a time. The rhythm of work had always brought him calm. It gave his mind structure, something predictable to hold on to when everything else felt unsteady. But today, even the calm felt thinner, like a thread stretched too tight. He was tightening a hose clamp when the familiar thump-thump of motorcycle tires on gravel snapped his focus. He let the wrench fall from his hand slowly and slid out from beneath the chassis. He knew that sound now. The motorcycle rolled to a stop just before the edge of the carport. The rider sat for a moment, helmet on, shoulders stiff. It wasn't Ronnie this time, it was Wade. Derek stood, didn't move closer, didn't speak. Wade killed the engine, pulled off his helmet, and held it against his chest for a long beat. His beard looked more gray than it had the week before. His eyes didn't carry the same heat. They just looked tired. "I won't stay long," Wade said, voice rough from either nerves or pride or both. Derek didn't answer, just watched. Wade cleared his throat, eyes flicking down the driveway like he was rehearsing words he'd already torn apart a dozen times. "I didn't come to fight," he finally said. "And I ain't here to make excuses." Still, Derek said nothing. But he didn't walk away either. Wade took that as permission to continue. "I talked to Ronnie," he said, voice quieter now. "Said he came by. Said you didn't slam the door in his face." Derek gave the faintest shrug. Didn't see the point. Wade nodded slowly. "You had every right to. After what I said, what I did. That night, I let something in me do the talking. And that part of me, it's ugly. Been around a long time. Silence. You see someone come in wearing a uniform and something in you wants to test it. But I think maybe it's not about them. Maybe it's about feeling like your own service got forgotten, like you got left behind. And when you see someone new, someone different wearing that same fabric, you think they don't know the cost. You assume?" Derek folded his arms. "So you were trying to protect something?" Wade's jaw twitched. "No," he said after a long pause. "I was trying to protect myself. From feeling small, from facing the fact that maybe the world's moved on, and I haven't." The wind picked up, tugging gently at the trees behind the house. Wade stared at the ground for a long time, then looked up. "I saw the way you held yourself," he said. "How you didn't lose control. I've seen a lot of men in uniform, but I never saw one handle a room the way you did. Calm, sharp, and steady." Still, Derek didn't speak, but his expression shifted ever so slightly. Less guarded, less steel. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Wade said, setting the helmet down on the seat of his bike. "But I needed to look you in the eye and tell you I was wrong." The two men stood there, surrounded by cicadas and dust and the slow churn of memory. Derek finally stepped forward just enough to shorten the distance. "You were wrong," he said simply. "But it matters that you know it. It matters that you're standing here now, instead of hiding behind more noise." Wade's shoulders relaxed just a bit. "I ain't great with words, but I respect you. That night I didn't. But I do now." Derek nodded once. "Then we don't have to stand in this driveway forever." Wade chuckled, the sound more grounded than mocking this time. "Fair enough." He reached out a hand. Not forcefully. Not like a gesture that demanded anything. Just open. Derek looked at it for a moment, then shook it. It was firm, brief, and just enough. Wade turned back to his bike, picked up the helmet, and mounted it without another word. He started the engine, gave Derek one final glance, and rode off into the dust and pines. Derek stood there for a long moment, then turned and looked up at the porch where his uniform hung, pressed, waiting. He didn't need to wear it today. Didn't need the fabric to remind him of who he was. He had already proven that, not to Wade, not to Ronnie, but to himself. And that was the only battle that ever truly mattered. There are some battles that never make the news. No headlines, no parades. Just the quiet wars waged in diners and bars, on sidewalks, in back porches, where a look lasts longer than a shove and a whisper can cut deeper than a blade. This was one of those battles. Not because fists flew or because sirens wailed, but because it asked one man to hold the line against ignorance without raising his voice, and another man to lower his. Derek didn't walk into Pine Hollow looking to prove anything. But sometimes life doesn't ask you if you're ready, it just hands you the moment. And the way you stand in that moment, it speaks, not just to others, but to the parts of yourself that still wonder if silence is enough, if grace has power, if calm can win. It can. Because in the end, real strength isn't loud. It's not bluster. It's not a threat shouted across a bar. It's a man sitting still, choosing not to swing until the world forces his hand. And when he does act, he acts with precision, with control, and with dignity. Derek didn't win that night because he pinned a man to a table. He won because he walked away with something Wade never expected: respect. Earned, not demanded. So maybe if there's a lesson in this, it's this: sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay still long enough for the world to catch up. And when it does, you meet it not with fury, but with the kind of steady strength that changes things. Quietly, one conversation at a time.